Yeah, welcome, and let us now look at more details about garment costing and pricing policies of the garments. So it is let us go into more details about garment costing and pricing. So let us first look at garment costing. So definition of garment costing. So how do we define, how do we understand garment costing? So according to a definition, cost accounting the is the that part of management accounting which establishes budgets and standard costs and actual cost of operations and processes departments and products and analysis of variances, profitability and social use of funds. So that means the cost accounting is costing and accounting called cost accounting is part of management accounting, which is establishes budgets, standard costs and actual cost of operations, processes and departments or products, and it also analyzes the variances, profitability and social use of funds. So thus cost accounting is the classifying, recording and appropriate allocation of expenditure for the determination of costs of products and services, and for the presentation of suitably arranged data for the purposes of control and guidance of the management. So cost accounting basically it records and appropriately allocates the expenditure so that you can determine the cost of the products, you can determine the cost of services, and you can do a proper costing of the product. So that can also be suitably presented to appropriate people also. Next, let us understand the term overhead. So what is a overhead? Overhead is an expense. Overhead is an expense. It is the aggregate cost of indirect materials, indirect costs. So overhead is nothing but it is an aggregation of the indirect costs, indirect expenditure. Division of costs. Here are some ways that costs can be divided. So how do we divide the costs? What kind of division can we have with respect to the costs? So one is prime cost. So what is a prime cost? Prime cost is direct materials plus direct laborers, that means direct labor cost plus direct expenses. So all these direct expenses of related to materials, related to labor, related to expense, all this come prime cost. So prime cost is basically a direct cost. Works or factory cost. The second is works or factory cost. It is prime cost plus works or factory overheads. That means the works factory cost includes, it is a total of prime cost plus factory overheads. So prime cost plus overheads is the factory cost. The next comes cost of production. Cost of production. Cost of production is works cost plus administration overheads. So cost of production includes both the cost of the works, how much it is costing to get the work done, and what are the administration overheads. So both put together is the cost of production. Finally, we come to the total cost or cost of sales. Total cost is equal to cost of production plus selling overheads plus distribution overhead. So cost of production plus selling overhead plus distribution overhead, this is the total cost. The total cost includes all these things: cost of production, selling overhead, distribution overheads. Cost classifications. Costs can be classified by nature or by elements or analytics. So there can be various ways in which costs can be classified. So it can be classified by functions. It can be classified as direct and indirect. Costs can also be classified by variability. They can also be classified by controllability. That means there are various parameters available for classification of the costs, like nature of the cost, nature and function, based on direct or indirect, based on the variability, and based on the controllability. And we can also classify based on normality, and we can also classify based on the time. And according to planning and control also there can be a classification, and there can be a classification based on managerial costs. Let us learn about each of these factors. By nature and elements or analytics, costs can be classified by nature, elements or analytical classification. This includes material, labor and expenses. So there can be, the costs can be in the nature of material, it can be in the nature of labor, it can be in the nature of expenses. And costs can also be classified by functions. So cost can also be classified by functions. What are the functions? For example, manufacturing. So manufacturing cost, say production cost, or selling cost, or commercial cost. So by the nature of function, by functional nature, you can also classify the costs. So they can include administrative costs to account for the expenses incurred on the administration, selling and distribution cost, selling and distribution cost to account for expenses incurred on selling and distribution. And we can also have costs related to research and development, so R&D expenses. So it is again a cost related to R&D function. Then costs we can also classify by controllability. By controllability, costs can be classified by controllability. These are controllable costs, uncontrollable costs. That means costs which can be controlled are called controllable costs. Costs which cannot be controlled may be called uncontrollable costs. Costs by normality. That means you can classify costs as a normal or abnormal. Costs can be classified by normality, which includes normal costs, and there can also be abnormal costs. There can be abnormal costs. And another parameter that can be applied for the classification of costs is the time. So there can be a classification based on the time factor. So according to, based on the time factor, costs can be classified on this basis. They are historical costs and predetermined costs. So historical costs are occurring because of the historical things, historically what was expended, and predetermined is what is calculated in advance. Costs that are calculated in advance can be called predetermined costs. And classification according to planning and control. Classification according to planning and control. Costs can be classified according to planning and control. It includes budgeted costs and standard costs. Budgeted costs means there is already a provision for the costs. That means you have planned to expend a certain amount on a certain activity, a certain plan. So there is a budget for that. That means there is already a plan prepared according to which you can spend the money. Standard cost is the cost which is a standard. So the expense that would be incurred in a particular activity, particular thing is standardized, and there is a standard amount allocated for that. So that is standard. So you can, standard amount can be spent anytime. So budgeted costs and standard costs, these are the classification according to planning and control. Then we have the managerial costs. What are managerial costs? Costs can be classified for managerial purposes. It includes marginal costs. So costs which are increasing marginally with the expense, with the addition of amounts. Opportunity costs. So opportunity cost is the cost incurred by foregoing a particular opportunity. Similarly, replacement cost. So replacement is a cost incurred for replacement of an item, replacement of a person, replacement of a resource. And finally, we can also have avoidable and unavoidable costs. There are costs which can be avoided, which can be done away with, and there will be costs which we cannot avoid. We have to necessarily incur those costs which we cannot avoid. So coming to costing, methods of costing. So now let us look at what are the methods of costing. There are job costing, contrast costing, batch costing, and process costing. So methods of costing include job costing, contrast costing, batch costing, and process costing. Similarly, you can also have unit costing, operating costing, and operation costing, and multiple costing. So these are the different ways or methods of costing. These are different methods of costing. So in a job costing, costs are collected and accumulated for each job, and work order or project or to project separately to analyze the cost according to each job. So job costing is a process where the costs are collected and accumulated for each job. To accomplish a particular job, what are the costs to be incurred and that will be accumulated for the completion of the job. So that accordingly the work order is issued and analyzed separately, so that the costing is done according to the task, according to the job to be accomplished. Similarly, we have contract costing. So in the contract costing is when job is big and spread over a long periods. When you have to do a task, when you have to do a job or a task over a long period of time, then you do contract costing. A separate account is kept for each individual contract. So that means contract-wise tracking of expenses, contract-wise estimation of expenses is done, and a separate account may also be maintained for each of the contract. Then a batch may represent a number of small orders. Passed through the factory in batch. So there are several orders may constitute one batch, and that will be processed and produced as a batch. So each batch is treated as a unit of cost. So each batch of production is treated as a unit of cost. Though it is made up of several orders, but it is for costing it is one unit. So it is treated as one unit and separately costed. So each unit is costed separately. So it is something is like an extension of job costing. In the process costing, the next thing is process costing. Process costing is a separate account. In this, a separate account is opened for each process, to which all expenditures incurred thereon are charged to that cost per unit at each process can be ascertained. That means you have a separate account opened for a particular process, and all the expenditures incurred in that process are charged so that per unit what is the cost incurred at each process can be ascertained. So Process wise, unit wise costing is ascertained and tracked by using a process costing. Then comes the unit costing. Now then the unit costing, the cost per unit of output and the cost of each item is ascertained. So in unit costing, see, per unit output, what is the cost incurred? Cost incurred for every unit of output is calculated, and so that you know what is the cost for each item. The manufacture is continuous and units are identical. So this is possible when the units produced are all identical and manufacturing process is continuous. Then only unit costing can be done. Then only unit costing makes meaningful, it makes sense. Then we have operating cost. Operating cost is used to ascertain the cost of services rendered. That means, so in order to do a certain operation, certain service, what is the cost incurred? What is the cost of that service can be calculated by doing a operation costing. For example, transport undertakings. The operation costing takes into consideration the rejections. Operation cost takes into consideration the rejections in each operation for calculating input to units and cost. It refers to conversion cost from raw materials to finished products. Similarly, conversion of raw materials to finished products can also be an example for a operating cost. Then we have multiple costing. Multiple costing represents the application of more than one method of costing. The multiple costing represents more application of more than one method of costing in respect to the same product. That means you are trying to see the costs by applying various methods with respect to the same product. So then it is called multiple costing. Coming to the techniques of costing. So what are the various techniques used in the costing? So let us look at the different techniques of costing. These include uniform costing, then marginal costing, then standard costing, historical costing, and direct costing. So these are the various techniques of costing: uniform costing, marginal costing, standard costing, historical costing, and direct costing. So uniform costing, it uses the same costing principles and or practices by several undertakings. It uses the same costing principles and or practices by several undertakings for common control and comparison of costs. So as the name indicates, uniform, it means using uniform costing principles. Then comes marginal costing. Marginal costing is the ascertainment of marginal cost by differentiating between the fixed and variable cost. It is used to ascertain the effect of changes in the volume or type of output on the product. That means marginal costing is basically the cost incurred when an additional product is produced. That means the products are uniform, and as the number of products are being produced, so there will be direct costs and indirect costs. So what is the additional amount of cost incurred by the manufacturing unit when an additional product is produced? That is called marginal cost. So that is called marginal cost. So marginal cost makes sense when you want to ascertain particularly the effect of volumes, the effect of producing certain extra products. So the marginal cost becomes important. Next costing technique is standard costing. Standard costing makes a comparison of the actual cost. Standard costing makes a comparison of the actual cost with a pre-arranged standard cost. So it involves comparison of the actual cost with a standard cost. The cost of any deviation called variances is analyzed by causes. That means what is the actual cost incurred and what is the standard cost to be incurred. Is there any deviation? If there is any deviation, what are the reasons for deviation? What are the causes for deviation? And analyze those causes and try to see that if they can be reduced or they can be avoided, so that the actual cost becomes standard cost and standard cost becomes the actual cost. Then another technique of costing is historical costing. Historical costing. It ascertains the costs effect after they have been incurred. That means the costing is done after product has been produced, after the process is over. That is costs actually incurred on work done in the past. So it is of historical in nature. So what were the costs involved on a process, on a production done sometime back, sometime in the past. So that is called historical costing technique. The another technique is direct costing. Another technique is direct costing. Direct costing is the practice of charging all direct costs. It is the practice of charging all direct costs, variable and some fixed costs relating to the operation, leaving all other costs to be written off against profits which they arise. So in direct costing, as the name indicates, only the direct expenses are taken into account. So the direct expenses, direct costs which go directly into the product or the service that is being produced are only considered. So that is called direct costing. Then comes stock of raw material. Stock of raw material. The stock of raw material is calculated as operating stock of raw materials. And that means add purchase of raw material. That means you have an opening stock of raw materials. So stock of raw material is calculated. First we have an opening stock of raw material available. That means opening stock. To that you add purchase of raw material. Any raw material purchased later you add to the opening stock. Then you minus the closing stock of the raw material. When you deduct the closing stock of raw material, so then you get what you get is the raw material consumed. That gives you the raw material that is consumed for the production or the process. So stock of work in progress. Stock of work in progress is calculated as follows. Prime cost, there is a prime cost which means the primary costs, plus opening stock of VIP, plus the opening stock of work in progress. Opening stock of work in progress, that is, and then the factory overheads incurred, minus closing work in progress, minus the closing work in progress. So that gives you the manufacturing work cost. Manufacturing works cost. And stock of finished goods. Stock of finished goods. Stock of finished goods is calculated as cost of production. You have cost of production. To that you add opening stock of finished goods. Opening stock of the finished goods. Then you minus the closing stock of finished goods. You minus the closing stock of finished goods. So that is what you get is the cost of goods sold. cost of the goods sold is obtained like that. Then we have types of fabrics. Types of fabrics. So what are the various types of fabrics? Because basically fabrics are the raw materials for the garment manufacturing. So it only makes important that we also have discussed the types of fabrics here. And the fabric types can be wovens or knitted fabrics. You can also have power loom made fabrics versus the automatic loom fabrics. That means the automatic looms in the mills. And we can also have the fiber dyed fabrics. So that means fiber is dyed, then the fabric they are converted into yarns through yarns and then to the fabrics. And there can also be fabrics which are yarn dyed. Yarn is dyed and then that yarn is processed into a fabric. Maybe it is knitted, maybe it is woven into the fabric. Fiber content of the fabric. So types of fabric can also be fiber based on the fiber content of fabric, such as cotton, wool, polyester, silk, blended fabrics, etc. That means based on the content of the fiber, the fabrics can be classified into different types. So cotton fabrics, woolen fabrics, polyester fabrics, silk fabrics. Then we can also have blended fabrics of 2-3 types. There can be linen fabrics, etc. Fabrics can also be classified into different types based on the type of dyeing and finish used. So they can also be classified based on the weight of the fabric, heavy fabrics, light fabrics, etc. So we can have the GSM, grams per square meter. What is the weight for grams per square meter? So based on that, we can classify the fabrics as heavy, medium and light. And fabrics can also be classified based on the type of yarn used, such as a ring spun yarn, open-ended yarn, corded and combed yarn. So based on that, we have different types of fabrics, like we have ring spun denim, we have a corduroy fabrics. So like that, we can have different types of fabric based on the type of yarn used. So unit of measurement. So unit of measurement is a quantity used as a standard of measurement. Unit of measurement is a quantity used as a standard of measurement. Unit of measurement for a woven fabric is normally in meters or yards, while for knitted fabric they are measured in kilograms or sometime in yards also. So generally for woven fabrics, normally they are measured in terms of meters or in terms of the meters and yards, while knitted fabrics are generally measured in terms of the weight in kilograms, or sometimes they are also measured in yards. The merchandiser should be aware of the unit of measurements while finding out the cost of the fabric. Sometimes buyer specifies the unit of measurement of fabric. So it is always makes sense to know what are the units of measurements while finding out the cost of the fabric. Sometimes a buyer specifies unit of measurement clearly. The next important concept for sourcing and is minimum order quantity. MOQ. It is called MOQ. Fabric minimum order quantity is nothing but smallest quantity of a product that fabric manufacturer can supply. So MOQ is the smallest quantity of product that fabric manufacturer can supply. So below that it is difficult for him, it doesn't make sense for him to supply the quantity below that quantity. It doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make the financial viability. So minimum order quantity is required for any order to be accepted by the fabric supplier. The minimum order quantity depends on the type of fabric. So what is the minimum order quantity? It again varies from type of fabric and on the capacity of the vendor. What is the production capacity of vendor? Based on that also the MOQ may vary. The MOQ plays an important role while ordering the fabric, so as it is directly affects the cost of the garment. So MOQ is very important because you have to order only the quantity of equivalent or more than the MOQ, and that also affects the cost of the garment. So basically your cost of the garment is majorly dependent on the fabric, and at what cost you are sourcing fabric may also be influenced by MOQ, and all these would ultimately add to your garment cost. So that is the significance of all this, the concept of MOQ. If the order of fabric is below the estimated MOQ, then the vendor charges more cost as compared to regular charges. So if the order quantity is, if it is less than minimum order quantity, still the vendor may accept the order, but charges would be higher. The rate that he charges per meter would be higher compared to a quantity that is above the MOQ. So that means the cost of garment would increase as the raw material cost, that is fabric cost, is increasing. Merchandiser need to keep MOQ in mind while doing the costing of small quantity orders. So the merchandiser, it always required, the buyer has to keep in mind the MOQ order quantity, because if he is going below MOQ, it greatly affects his costs. So they should always be aware of MOQ quantities, and accordingly they should be doing that. Yeah, the next concept is order quantity. What is order quantity? So the cost of fabric may vary with the order quantity, because as the volume of the order increases, there is a possibility for bargaining a better price. So the cost of fabric may vary with the order quantity. The more the order quantity, the cost of fabric may be optimized to a certain level. So that means if the order quantity is increasing, so the price can be, there is a scope for reduction of price till certain extent. So depending on the volume of the order, so price can be accordingly be negotiated. But again, this depends on the type of the fabric required and fabric manufacturer capacity, along with negotiations between fabric buyer and the supplier. So all this would depend again on the what is the type of fabric, and what is the capacity of fabric manufacturer, and what are the negotiations between fabric buyer and the supplier. So there are all these factors which would influence this price and the order quantity. The next thing that can influence the order quantity could be Incoterm, where the fabric may be exported or imported. Then Incoterms also come into picture. Incoterms means international commercial terms, as prescribed by ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, based in Paris. Incoterm used is a factor that makes huge difference in fabric cost while importing the fabric from another country. A merchandiser needs to deal with supplier for delivery of the fabric on the basis of Incoterms. So the Incoterms can vary, like X works, it can be free on board, it can be cost, insurance and freight, and it can be delivered duty paid, TDP. So all this, any of these terms can be used based on the convenience and negotiations between the supplier and the buyers. So based on their negotiation, based on their convenience, it will be decided. So then these Incoterms decide as to who will bear the cost of transportation and risk. That means depending on the Incoterm used. So buyer and supplier, who is responsible till what, and who is responsible, how much. So all these things are clearly defined based on the Incoterm used. No matter which Incoterm is used, all the cost needs to be charged to the buyer. If the fabric is purchased by using XW, that is X works Incoterm, then the merchandiser needs to add the transportation cost along with the custom clearance charges and the price of fabric while calculating the garment cost. That means ultimately whether whoever is whatever the Incoterm is used, the buyer may be ultimately bearing all the expenses and the risk that is involved in the business since he is a buyer. So that invariably that has to be added to the cost of the fabric. So that will anyway has to be added. Cost calculations of fabric in a garment. Cost calculations of fabric in a garment. Considering the knitted fabric and t-shirt as an end product, then fabric consumption can be calculated as follows. Fabric consumption in kg is equal to body length plus sleeve length plus allowance multiplied by chest plus allowance multiplied by 2 into GSM. The whole thing divided by 10,000 constant factor. Probably it would give you the consumption of knits in kgs. Fabric consumption for woven fabric. Fabric consumption for a woven fabric. For woven fabric and shirt as an end product, then the fabric consumption can be calculated as follows. Fabric consumption in meters could be full length plus sleeve length plus allowance, that multiplied by chest plus allowance multiplied by 2 multiplied by fabric width, the whole thing divided by 39.37, which is a constant. That would give fabric consumption in meters, fabric consumption of woven fabrics in meters. Cost calculation. These methods are used to calculate fabric consumption roughly at a sampling stage by merchandiser. This formula will give approximate calculation for pre-costing stage of the garment. Sometimes fabric consumption is also done by forming a miniature marker by CAD department. That means calculation of fabric consumption is very, very crucial. Optimizing the fabric consumption using a CAD department help is again one of the important factors. So ultimately using the above formulas we can calculate the cost of the garment. These are the constraints of fabric consumption. So what are the constraints of the fabric consumption to optimize or rather to optimize the fabric consumption? One is fabric cuttable width. So there are selvages on either side of the fabric generally. So these selvages would not be useful for the garment manufacturing. So we need to take that into consideration. And also what is the width? Fabric cuttable width. So width depending on the garment, depending on the type of the garment that is going to be manufactured, the cuttable width may make a difference. Some widths may be, in some of the widths the fabric consumption can be optimized well. In some widths it is difficult to optimize the fabric consumption. So that is again one criteria. Another criteria could be repeat size. So what is the repeat size? That is again another important criteria. Pattern type to be informed to the CAD along with the buyer tech pack order in order to calculate exact width and consumption. So in order to calculate the exact fabric consumption, we need to inform the CAD department about the buyer given technical package details. That means which includes the measurements and sizes, etc. Cost calculation. Cost calculation, the marker efficiency considered 80 to 85% depending upon the fabric type. That means marker efficiency is generally considered from 80 to 85%. Again, depending on the type of the fabric, whether it is a solid dyed fabric or a stripe or a check. If it is a stripe and check, they have to match in the parts that they are cutting. So consumption may, the efficiency may go down slightly. If it is a solid dyed, the efficiency may be higher. So it depends on the type of the fabric. Efficiency can be changed depending upon fabric parameters. So efficiency can be depending on the fabric parameter, efficiency can change. Particularly matching the parameters of buyer. So buyer may give certain parameters to be matched. So when these requirements are increasing, efficiency may take a beating. And it also depends on what is the type of style that is the garment is going to be. So based on that also, the cost calculations and marker efficiency would be varying. The buffer in the consumption should be added to the fabric. The buffer in the consumption should be added to the fabric by merchandiser. Generally it is 0.03 to 0.08 of total fabric consumption. That means we need to keep some buffer while calculating the fabric consumption. So if this buffer will be saving in case of any minor differences in the consumption, in case of minor increases in the consumption. So it would be of great help. In case of a trim fabric, so that is maybe it is a interlining the 10 to 20% more buffer is kept. 10 to 20% more buffer is kept while ordering the interlining. That means if you are ordering some trim fabric interlining, the buffer is more. It is 10 to 20%. So in order to maintain the inventory and to avoid the shortage during the production, fabric wastage percentages to be added also while calculating the fabric consumption. So we always should take into consideration certain amount of wastage that is possible while making the garments. So the fabric wastages that are possible should be taken into consideration while ordering the fabrics, because it is not easy to source the fabric, and we may not be able to source the fabric all of a sudden. So that is why while calculating the fabric consumption, considerable wastage depends. Again, it depends what is the wastage. It may be depending on the factory percentages, factory practices, what is the efficiency and effectiveness of the factories. So, and the type of the fabric and what type of fabric is being used. Certain fabrics consumption, the wastage may come highly. In certain fabrics, wastage may be less. It also depends on the types of processes that are going to be used in the making of garments. If the garment involves embroidery, it involves washing, then the wastage is likely to increase. So depending on the processes involved, depending on the type of the fabric, and depending on the type of the garment that is going to be made, so there can be the wastage levels can vary depending on the context. So accordingly, the merchandiser has to take a prudent decision about what is the optimum wastage that is to be taken into consideration. Then comes trims. Trims include all materials. Trims include all materials other than fabric used in the garment. So fabric is anyway the main raw material, the main piece good, and all other things that go into the garment can be considered as trims. For example, most garments have accessories. Most garments have accessories like threads. There can be buttons, and then zippers, and labels, elastics, and miscellaneous items. So all these things can be considered as trims. Quality and quantity of trim and labor required to apply it on garment are directly related to the cost of the garment. That means trims are again a very important factor of cost, and anything other than the main fabric that is going into the garment can be considered as trims. So there can be zippers, labels, buttons, etc. And quality and quantity of trims, and what is the labor required to apply it to the garment. So these are all the related to the adding directly to the cost of garment. The different trims have different UOM. Even same trim can have 2-3 different UOM that can be summarized as follows. So UOM of terms used in garments. Trims, threads, 1000 meter tube or 2000 or 5000 meter cone. Labels unit wise, zippers unit wise, buttons in terms of gross, one gross is equal to 144 units. Similarly, poly bags. Poly bags can be with respect to the unit, number of units, and thickness is measured in terms of millimeters, or there is also a gauge. So the poly bags are again used. Unit of measurement is units, number of units. Again, thickness is again measured in millimeters, and there is also a gauge system. Cotton boxes again in terms of number of units. Handbags can be in terms of number of units. Shanks again like buttons, they are also measured in gross. One gross is being equal to 144 units. Then we have rivets. Rivets are again generally measured as units, so many units. Lace. Lace is the general measurement for lace is 50 meter. 150 meter is 1 unit of measurement. Hanger is again by units, number of units. Tapes and velcro. Tapes and velcro is again mentioned. The unit of measurement is either 50 meter as 1 unit or 1 kg as 1 unit of measurements. Then again we have elastics. Elastics are also again every 50 meter is considered as an unit of measurement. Other factors that need to consider while calculating the trim cost is MOQ, that means minimum order quantity. So the minimum order quantity, lead time, and quality of raw material used to make the trims. So in case of trims, other important trim cost is what is the minimum order quantity. So that is again has to be considered. Then comes the one of the important trim, that is thread. After fabric, thread is another component. After fabric, thread is another component which needs to be considered for calculating the cost of garments. The most. The consumption of thread is calculated by Industrial Engineering Department. The consumption of thread is generally calculated by a master, or it can be a Industrial Engineering Department, which is called IE department. It is dependent upon the type of seam. So what is the seam types and number of stitches per inch, SPI. So the thread consumption would depend on type of the seams used in the garment. It is also dependent on the SPI used in the stitching, that is number of stitches per inch is again important consideration. While ordering the thread, the operation breakdown and number of sewing machine for that particular style should be taken into consideration. So while putting an order for the threads, we need to take into consideration the operation breakdown and the number of machines, etc. Accordingly, number of cones of thread needs to be ordered. So generally each cone will have certain amount of thread. So you can, depending on the requirement, see they can order so many numbers of the threads, so many cones of the threads. In order to calculate thread consumption, special softwares are also available. So nowadays we have software packages where all these ordering the trims and managing the inventory of trims, everything is possible. So special softwares are available, and which gives accurate thread consumption. So it is also possible to calculate exact thread consumptions using the softwares. Sometimes thread can be computed. Sometimes thread can be computed as while preparing the sample. So when the export house or the garment manufacturing unit is making a sample, so while making the sample itself, thread consumption can be actually be calculated. So initial weight of thread cone is measured. So in this, what you will do, they will weight the initial weight of the cone, and once the sample is prepared, after preparation of the sample, the thread cone is again measured. So whatever is the difference in the weight, so that much of thread is obviously consumed in the preparation of sample. That means for one garment, how much this thread is considered consumed is practically calculated. So that is how thread consumption can also be calculated practically while making the sample itself. The difference of weight gives how much thread is consumed. So obviously you have weighed the cone of thread before the preparation of the sample. Then you have used the thread from that cone while making the sample. After sample preparation is completed, again you have weighed the cone of the thread. So obviously the difference of the weight gives how much thread is consumed. And converting that into meters will give actual thread consumption for that particular garment. So then now you know the weight, the thread consumption in terms of the weight. Thread consumption in terms of weight is calculated. So then you will know what is the weight of a given length of thread. So you convert the weight into number of meters. So then you will get an accurate estimation of consumption of thread in terms of meters. So while ordering the thread, it is important to consider the wastage, normally which is 10 to 15%. So you also need to add certain amount of wastage to your order. What is the calculated consumption? To that you add a 10 to 15% as a wastage. Then you then you know what is the order quantity of thread for that order. Then the next thing is labels. The next aspect is labels. Several labels are used in the garment. So when you go to a store and look at the garment, and you see there are several labels attached to the garment. So these labels can be like main label, which gives the brand name, brand identity. It talks about the product, and there is also a label called care label. Care label gives wash care instructions, and there can also be a size label, which indicates the size of the garment, and there can also be a content label, or size content label can also be combined. So content label gives what is the content of the fabric of the garment, what type of fabric is used. So the fabric type is indicated in the content label. So like that, mainly we have main label, which indicates the brand, probably care label, and content labels and size labels are commonly commonly seen labels in the garment. The cost of label depends upon make of label. So what type of make is the label, the cost would accordingly will vary. So that means it is what type of fiber it is made. That means the fiber content of the label, printed or jacquard label. So whether it is a printed label or the label is made in a jacquard manner, or size of the labels. It also depends on what is the size of the label. As the size increases, probably the cost also would increase. Maybe the printed labels may cost less than the jacquard labels, and what type of colors are used in the labels. So it depends. The cost would vary depending on the type of the label, the content, the fabric content, the fiber content of the label, and other types of the labels. A unit garment label cost may not play significant role. That means in a 1 unit the garment label cost may not play significant role. But in case of a mass production, when you look at the mass, maybe some 50,000 garments, 1 lakh garments, then it is again a big considerable expense. So, but in case of mass production, it plays a vital role. The other factors that are important, the other factors that are also important while ordering the labels is minimum order quantity and the order quantity. So, they also have to be taken into consideration. The next thing could be zippers or zipper. So, zipper are again very frequently come across accessory or trim in a garment. Zippers also have several types. So, zippers are also of several types. You can see that there are metallic zippers, and we can also see the nylon zippers. So, different types of zippers can be seen, which play drastic role in the cost of zipper. That means what is the type of zipper? Zipper is made what type of material, whether it is made of metals, whether it is made of nylon. So, that is also has a major role in deciding the cost of the zipper. Merchandiser should be aware of the parameters of zipper for accurate costing and negotiation. So, zipper has got again several parameters. They can be a dye to match zippers. That means zipper color is matching with the main body of the garment or fabric. So, like that, there can be different types of zippers, metallic, nylon, and different types of materials. So, it depending on the type of the zipper. So, the cost would vary. Then again, minimum order quantity. Again, minimum order quantity is the parameter. Minimum order quantity is the parameter which affects the cost of the zipper. Again, so minimum order quantity, like as it affects any other product, it also affects the zipper also considerably. At a certain minimum order quantity, only zipper will get you will get a desired price for your zipper. So, if you order minimum order quantity, you are likely to get a very good price for your zippers. Then the next important thing is buttons. So, buttons are very common in a garment, and so it is a very important trim component. Buttons can be made up of different types. There can be different types of buttons. So, nylon buttons can be there. You can see plastic buttons, acrylic buttons made with acrylic material. There are buttons made with wood. There are buttons made with shell, and there is also you can see that metallic buttons. So, buttons can be made with a variety of materials. You can see buttons made with variety of the materials. But every type of button has its own MOQ. Depending on the material and type, MOQ quantity, minimum order quantity may again change, and it by manufacturer will decide that as per his costing. So, again minimum order quantity plays an important role in the cost of the buttons. So, buttons are usually purchased in terms of gross. So, with line specified. So, generally 1 gross, you have buttons available in 1 gross in 1 packet. So, 1 packet consists of 1 gross of buttons. 1 gross means 144 buttons, which is equal to 12 dozen. 1 dozen is equal to 12 buttons. So, 12 dozen is equal to 144 buttons. So, 1 gross is nothing but 112 dozen packet. So, the another important trim could be poly bag. The cost of poly bag is highly dependent on its thickness and dimensions, like length and width of the poly bag and thickness of the poly bag material, that is the polyethylene sheet. So the raw material, what type of raw material is used to make the poly bag. So again, the cost of poly bag is dependent on its dimensions, its material and its thickness. The poly bag ordered in terms of number of pieces. Generally the unit of measurement for poly bags is number of units, number of pieces. The cost of poly bag is equally important. The cost of poly bag is equally important as it gives significant difference when we consider the whole order quantity. So when you see the cost of a single poly bag, it may not be very high. But when you are using poly bags for a huge order quantity of say 1 lakh garments, 50,000 garments, 2 lakh garments, then the poly bag cost again is an important consideration for the garment costing. Another important trim or accessory could be the cartons. The cartons. Cartons are a very important packing material for the finished goods. Just like the poly bag, the cost of cartons is highly dependent on material used and dimensions. So again, as with the poly bags, cartons also, it is the cost of the cartons is dependent on the type of the material used and also thickness of the carton used. So this is again depend, and also the material and the dimensions of the carton box. Depending upon these factors, the cost of cartons is decided. The unit of measurements for cartons is generally again it is the number of units, while cost varies with the minimum order quantity. Again, here also minimum order quantity becomes an important criterion deciding the actual cost of cartons being used. These are procured based on the number of plies. So there, how many plies are there in the carton box material, and what are the dimensions? Length, width and depth of the carton box, and GSM of the paper used to make the carton. So another important criteria to decide the cost is what is the weight of the paper used to make the carton. The weight of the paper in terms of grams per square meter. Generally, the number of plies used in carton box is 3 or 7 or 9 ply. So generally, the popularly used carton boxes will have the ply number either 3 or 7 or 9. For example, 9 ply, 60, 40, 40 and 4 side calico, 1 side print and 180 GSM can be an example of a carton box. So it gives the number of plies, it gives the dimensions of the carton box, and it gives what is the one side it is a 4 side it is a calico, 1 side it is a print, and it also giving the weight of the paper used in the carton box as 180 GSM. The next thing is handbags. Next trim is handbag. Handbag or price tags. It is hand tags. Hand tags or price tags are used as packing material. Hand tags are used as a packing material. The cost of hand tags are dependent upon material used. The cost of hand tags dependent on the material used, and also printing on it, and also minimum order quantity. Hand tags are again very important trim, because hand tags can be used as a price tags, it can be used as a product information tag, like that. So the cost of handbags is again dependent on the what is the material used of the what is the dimensions of the hand tag, and also what is the printing used and minimum order quantity. The next trim we can talk about is shanks and rivets. Generally, shanks and rivets are trims that are made of metallic or made of metals. So rivets and shanks are generally and most of the time they are made of metals. The unit of measurements for rivets and shanks is also like buttons. It is also gross. That means one packet or 1 unit of measurement would be 144 units or 12 dozens. So, and there can also be, but rivets may be sometimes measured in terms of the number of pieces or units, but shanks most of the time is generally in terms of the gross. The cost of shanks and rivets is dependent upon minimum order quantity also. So here also minimum order quantity plays a role, and the exact cost, exact expense paid for these can also be influenced by minimum order quantity. The next thing is hangers. Hangers are again another important trim material. So hangers are usually made up of hard plastics or sometimes wood. So again the material can vary. Generally mostly hard plastic. So in a specific case, maybe there may be wooden hangers used. The cost of a hanger depends on the material used and size of the hanger, print and color on it. That means the material used and size and the print any used on the hanger and color. These are the parameters which would influence the cost of hangers. Generally, transparent hangers are costlier than the colored ones. So the transparent hangers are generally costlier than the opaque and colored hangers. Then comes tags and velcro. So tags and velcro. Tapes are purchased based on the width, and mobile on the tapes are purchased in cages. Thus, increase in the width by 100% increases the cost by 80%. That means if the tape width is increasing by 100%, the cost would increase by 80%. For satin tapes, for tapes made of satin material, increase in width by 150% increases the cost by 250%. That means satin tapes are relatively expensive. Another factor that affects the cost of tapes and velcro is again minimum order quantity. Calculation of trim charges. Trim charges are usually calculated as the different type of sourcing and mode of transportation. So depending on the source from which the trims are sourced and the mode of transportation, the cost of the trims is calculated. If the shipment is by air, then trim cost is 15 to 25% more. If the trim cost is if the shipment is by air, trim cost would increase by 15 to 25%, and more cost is quoted to the buyer. Depending on the freight charges, also the cost of the trims would vary. If shipment is by sea, then the trim cost plus 10 to 15% more cost is quoted to the buyer depending on the freight charges. That means, so trim cost plus some percentage is added to account for the freight cost. If domestic sourcing is there, then the local taxes, transportation charges, so they also add to the trim cost. In case of domestic sourcing, the local taxes are also added and also the transportation costs. So then you will get the total cost of the trim. These additions are done by the merchandiser. So all these costing and additions to the cost are done by merchandiser depending upon the business outlook. Other charges included during the costing by the merchandiser. So there may be one rejection and wastage charges. So there can be some leverage kept for rejection and wastage. It may be from 2 to 5%. So you add 2 to 5% more to the cost to account for rejections and wastages. And it also depends on the order quantity. Commission on foreign exchange is 2 to 3%. Commission of buying house, if it is applicable, will be 1 to 1.5%. So they all add to the cost of the trims. Then internal transportation charges $1 to $2 per garment. So that also is added. Margin decided by marketing department by looking at business scenario is 10 to 15%. After adding all these costs, you also add some margin to the cost by looking at business scenario. So that will be decided by the marketing department. Testing inspection charges of 1 to 2% are also added. Testing and inspection charges of inspection charges up to 1 to 2% are also added to the total cost. The next thing is CMT. Next cost component for the garment costing is CMT. CMT is cut, make, trim. It is the conversion cost. Basically, conversion of raw materials, that is the fabrics and trims, into garment. So how much, what is the conversion, what is the labor cost involved in converting the raw materials into the final product? So cut, make, trim is CMT. The cost of making done in-house is based on the total cost per hour multiplied by number of hours it takes to make the style and divided by the number of units produced if the making is done by a contractor. The contractor adds profits on this amount. So it depends on the whether you are making the manufacturing the product in a house, whether you are manufacturing the product by contracting to the outside source. So the costing will be done accordingly. If it is in-house manufacturing, so what is the amount of total wages paid to the production people involved in the conversion of the goods, so divided by the capacity or number of garments produced in that period. So if you calculate the total amount of wages paid to the operators, supervisors, and those directly involved in the production of the garments, the total amount is divided by the total number of garment produced. That gives what is the conversion cost for one garment. So that is called CMT per garment. So it can also be calculated like this: labor cost per minute is equal to monthly salary of an operator by total minutes available in the month at 100% efficiency. CM cost is equal to SAM of the department multiplied by the minute cost of the labor upon line efficiency. Value added services. So there are also certain value added services which are also adding to the cost. Value added services is the cost added to the special processes. So it is the cost of the special processes involved in the garment manufacturing, like embroidery, printing, washing, used to impart the type of look the buyer wants. So it is the value added services could be a embroidery, it could be a printing, it could also be a washing. So all these things would impart the type of garment that the buyer is looking. So these are associated with the cost of the garment manufacturing. Then there can be wet processing chemicals, washing, and contracted operations. So ultimately all these expenses have to be accounted and included in the garment costing. Wet processing chemicals include bleaches, detergents, softeners, neutralizers, wetting agents, and resins. Complicated wet process finishes contribute a significant amount of price of a product. That means involvement of complicated wet processes, if they are involved, they can add to a significant amount of cost to the garments, to the product. Merchandiser must know in detail about these operations. That means the merchandiser should have a fairly good idea of these operations and the costing of the same. So then only you will be able to assess the costs involved, and will also be not misled by anybody on this costing process. Sourcing, contracting requirement, and time involved. Cost of these varies depending on different styles. So the cost of the sourcing, contracting the requirements, and time involved would vary from style to style, order to order. So that is how it happens, and ultimately the cost of all these wet processes and things, related things, should also be added to the garment if they are present in the garment manufacturing process. For example, embroidery costing requires derivation of thread consumption. That means in the embroidery how much thread is consumed. Additional cost of hand embroidery is involved. If it is a hand embroidery, what is the additional cost involved? Printing costing is dependent on number of colors and printing. Like means, so whatever is the value added service, if it is embroidery, what is the cost involved for doing that embroidery? So the embroidery, it is the making of embroidery cost by machinery can be calculated. Similarly, you can also see what is the thread consumed and what is the cost of the thread consumed in the embroidery. Similarly, if it is a hand embroidery, again, what is the consumption of thread and what is its cost, and what is the labor charges for doing hand embroidery. So all these things would add to the cost of embroidery, adding to the cost of garment. So printing, again, if there is a printing involved, printing cost would again depend on the type of the printing and what are the number of colors involved. As the number of colors involved increases, the printing cost would increase, and anyway, minimum order quantity would always be there to affect the costing, and the type of printing also would decide the cost of the printing. Example of garment costing. Example of garment costing. The example of garment cost is given by assuming the following dimensions. Following are the dimensions assumed for this costing. The garment is polo neck t-shirt. Polo neck t-shirt. Number of pieces is equal to 4,000. Salary of operator is 6,000 per month. And number of working days 26. Line efficiency considered 50%. Sewing SAM is 15 minutes. And cutting SAM is 7 minutes. So then there is a, if you assume the salary in terms of the dollars, $120 per month can also be assumed as the salary of the operator. If the dollar is, then if let us take dollar as 50 rupees, then the chest is equal to 60 centimeters, length HSP, eye shoulder point to waist, the length is coming to 75 centimeters, sleeve length is 25 centimeters. So fabric used is 2x60s, 100% cotton SJ fabric. So GSM is 180. GSM is 180. So the fabric consumption in kgs is given by body length plus sleeve length plus allowance multiplied by chest plus allowance multiplied by 2 multiplied by GSM upon 10,000. So if you calculate like that, then it becomes, if you put the values in place, then it is 75 plus 25 plus 2 multiplied by 60 plus 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 180 GSM upon 10,000, that is equal to 2.224 kgs, 0.224 kgs plus the weight of cuff and collar is 0.08 kgs. So that gives the total amount, total weight or total consumption of the fabric. Calculation of CMT charges. The next thing is calculation of CMT charges. CMT charges are calculated as total available capacity per month. Total available capacity per month in minute. That is 26 working days into 8 hours per day and multiplied by 60 per minutes per hour, which gives 12,480 minutes. That means 12,480 minutes. Labor cost per minute is equal to monthly salary of an operator by total minutes available in the month at 100% efficiency. So that is 6,000 by 12,480, because the labor cost, the labor salary is 6,000. So the number of minutes available is 12,440. So 6,000 upon 12,480, 6,000 upon 12,480 is equal to 0.480 rupees. That means 0.48 rupees. Sewing cost, SAM of the garment. Sewing cost is given by SAM of the garment multiplied by minute cost of the labor upon line efficiency percent. So if you look at SAM of the garment is 15 and the minute cost of the labor is equal to 0.48 rupees. So this upon 50, we are at 50% efficiency gives, it comes to $0.288. $0.288. Then we have cutting cost. Cutting cost is equal to SAM of cutting multiplied by minute cost of the labor and upon cutting efficiency. So it is 7 multiplied by 0.48 upon 50, which is $0.134. That is the cutting cost. Trimming cost is considered as $0.06 as it depends upon how many operators are there for trimming. So production cost of garment, CMT. Production cost of garment, CMT, is equal to sewing cost plus cutting cost plus trimming cost. So it comes 0.288 plus 0.134 plus 0.06 is equal to $0.482. So that is the production cost of a garment which is cut, make, trim. Then let us look at FOB cost of the garment. So fabric, the costing elements for FOB cost of garment includes fabric cost plus 7% duty, trim cost plus 7% duty, fabric and trim transportation charges, testing plus inspection charges, commission on foreign exchange, buying house commission, rejection at 5%, value addition services, CMT, cut, make, trim, margin, and then total FOB cost of the garment. So in the previous example, the fabric cost plus 7% of duty is coming $1.97, trim cost plus 7% duty is coming $0.3, fabric and trims transportation charges is coming $0.06, testing plus inspection charges is working out to be $0.2, commission on foreign exchange is working out to be $0.08, buying house commission is working out to be $0.16, rejection at 5% is coming out to be $0.16, value addition services is taken as $0.2, CMT as we calculated earlier, it is $0.482, margin is $0.5. So the total FOB cost of the garment is coming to be $4.11. Conclusion: production merchandiser is responsible for doing the costing. Production merchandiser is ultimately it is the production merchandiser who is responsible for doing the costing. Hence, the knowledge of costing is a must for a merchandiser. That means you cannot be a good merchandiser, you cannot be a successful merchandiser if you don't know the costing process. Apart from costing knowledge, merchandiser must be aware of fluctuation in the cost of different components of the garment from time to time, how the fabric costs are varying, how the trim costs are changing. So you should be aware of fairly, you should have a fairly good idea of the costs of all these things. And finally, costing is a very dynamic process. It is not a static. Once you do one costing one for a garment, it is not that it is done forever, because everything is dynamic here. The prices are fluctuating, fabric prices keep changing, trim prices keep changing, CMT keep changing. So we need to keep working in a real-time basis, as costing is a dynamic process. At international level, negotiation is done only on the cost of production and most popularly known as FOB of the garment. Hence, the merchandiser should be very careful while negotiating the cost of the garment with the buyer. So, cost negotiation is a very careful exercise. A merchandiser cannot afford to make any mistake therein. He cannot afford to make any mistake therein. Sourcing is common practice. Sourcing is a common practice globally in garment production and garment business. Production merchandiser is playing buyer's role in fabric trim manufacturing. On the other hand, he or she plays supplier role for garment buyer. So that means a production manager has the double role to play. So for a garment buyer, he or she is the supplier. For a fabric supplier, she is the buyer. She can be the buyer. So that way she or he plays the double role of being a supplier and being a buyer. The production merchandiser must take care of both the roles when it comes to cost as well. So that makes all the more important that merchandiser knows the costing process very well. He should be a great expert in the costing. So that is how it should happen. Here are some examples of garment costing. The next module is the pricing policies of the garment. So pricing strategies. So pricing is many a times is more of a strategic decision. So finally, let us look at some of the pricing strategies that are commonly adopted by the companies. So the pricing strategies and methods that are employed would involve one, geographical pricing, price discounts and allowances, promotional pricing, discriminatory pricing, and product mix pricing. The geographical pricing. So the first thing is geographical pricing. So it may be in the cash or counter trade or barter. Geographical pricing involves the company deciding how much price its products to different customers, how to price the products to different customers in different locations in the countries. So here geographical pricing essentially means that so the pricing would vary geographically in different locations. So it may be to take care of the transportation costs involved. It may be to take care of some local tariffs and taxes that are involved. So there will be some changes according to the geographical region where the product is being sold. So in geographical pricing, the pricing would vary depending on the geographical location. And counter trade may account for 15 to 25% of the world trade and takes several forms. Barter is the direct exchange of goods. Barter means directly exchanging goods for goods. There is no money, no third party involved. You are exchanging goods for goods. So in a compensation deal, the seller receives some percentage of the payment in cash and the rest is in products. So in another case where a compensation deal is involved, seller receives some percentage of the payment in cash, rest is in the form of products. In a buyback arrangement, the seller sells a plant, equipment and technology to another country, to another party, and agrees to accept as partial payments products manufactured with supplied equipment. That means he agrees to accept as a partial payment the product manufactured with the supplied equipment. That is basically you have an agreement to buy back the, so you supply the equipment and buy back the products. So that is the buyback arrangement, one of the forms. In an offset deal, the seller receives full payment in cash. But agrees to spend a substantial amount of the money in that country within a stated time. So that is what is known as a offset deal. Price discounts and allowances. The role of offering discounts can be a usual tactic. In response to aggressive competition by a competitor. So when a competitor is aggressive, so then the role of discounts becomes important. So there is a price war, it may lead to a price war where the sellers are trying to sell the products at less price, and so it is, in that case the price discounts and allowances become important. However, discounting can be dangerous unless carefully controlled and conceived as part of overall marketing strategy. So this discounting is not always healthy for the business. So it should be carefully considered and used as a tactic as and when it is required. So price wars can lead the companies to losses. So one has to be very, very careful, and there should be a properly deliberated decision. To give discounts should be a properly deliberated and estimated decision to increase the sales and to increase the business. So that has to be taken care. Let us look briefly at the main types of discounts common today. So what are the various types of discounts that are given out and that are commonly seen in the marketplace? One is cash and settlement discounts. Then we have quality discounts. Then you have promotional discounts. Cash and settlement discount. So what do we understand by the term cash and settlement discounts? Cash and settlement discounts are intended to bring in the payments faster, and which are paid during cash payment and final settlement. So a discount given basically to encourage timely payments. So cash discounts and settlement discounts are generally given to encourage the timely discounts, to encourage the timely payments by the buyers. Then we have the next term, that is quality discounts. So what is the meaning of quality discounts? The trouble with quality discounts is that when formalized on a published price list, they become an established part of your pricing structure, and as a result, impact can be lost. So quality discounts have to be dealt carefully. So we have to, when you formalize especially, it is a tricky situation. So quality discounts should always be dealt carefully. Then comes promotional discounts. Promotional discounts are the best kind of discounts because they enable you to retain the power to be flexible. So these are discounts given basically to promote the sales, to promote the store. There may be at times when you want to give an extra boost to sales, to shift an old product before launching an updated one, before launching a new one in place. So you want to sell off the existing one. So these may be conditions where promotional discounts may be given as a promotional tool. Promotional pricing. companies can use several pricing techniques to stimulate early purchase. So these techniques include loss leader pricing, special event pricing, cash rebates, low interest financing, longer payment terms, warranties and service contracts, and psychological discounting. So the first one is loss leader pricing. So what is a loss leader pricing? Supermarkets and department stores often drop the price on well-known brand to stimulate a additional store traffic. So loss leader pricing is a deep discount announced on a popular product of a popular brand, a highly popular product of a popular brand is announced as a loss leader. That means it is sold at a very low price or at a break-even price or even less than the break-even price, so that the traffic to the store increases. People will be flocking to the store to buy that popular item which is announced as a loss leader, which is announced to sell at a very less price. So, but as and when they enter the store, so many of them may end up buying certain other products. They are buying more products than the what is the intention with which they have come to the store. So thus it increases, loss leader pricing increases the store traffic to the store, the footfalls are increased, and again the conversions may be increased. So that is how loss leader pricing would be a promotional pricing for the store. This pays if the revenue on the additional sales compensates for the lower margins on the loss leader pricing. So that means basically the additional sales generated, additional revenue generated, additional profit generated because of the loss leader pricing, should more than compensate the money foregone in the loss leader pricing, the money that revenue that is lost in the loss leader pricing. So then only this makes a sensible strategy. Then manufacturers of loss leader brands typically object to this because practice can dilute the brand image and bring complaints from retailers who charge the list price. But this involves reaction from the brand owner that this brand is put on sale and put as a loss leader, because it may dent into the brand image. So generally the brand owners would object to a store announcing their product as a loss leader. So because they will also, one is the concern about the brand image, second one is the reaction from other retailers who are selling the product at the listed price. So these are the two problems involved in the loss leader pricing. Then comes special event pricing. Another technique is special event pricing. Sellers will establish special prices in certain season to draw in some customers. So in a special season or a special event, the special prices are announced. Maybe it is a festive season, or maybe the store has announced some promotional week for the store where the many of the things are store is highly promoted, advertised, and is doing a special annual event for the store. So that time again there can be a special prices announced. So these are called special event pricing. Then comes cash rebates. Auto companies and other consumer goods companies offer cash rebates to encourage purchase of the manufacturer's products within a time period. So if you are buying those products within the stipulated time period, you will get a cash rebate. Rebates can help clear inventories without cutting the stated list price. So rebates are again will help to clear the inventories. Then comes low interest financing. In this technique, instead of cutting its price, a company can offer customers low interest financing. So the price is maintained, but customers are offered a low interest financing, where very low interest or even zero interest financing is also sometimes offered to promote the sales. A typical example is where automakers have even announced no interest financing to attract the customers. So it is common in particularly in automobile field. Some of the automobile makers they announce financing at zero interest, just so that they can promote the products and the sales. Longer payment terms. Sellers, especially mortgage banks, auto companies, stretch loans over a long period, thus lowering the monthly payments. That means by increasing the payment term and making it longer, the monthly monthly installment amount is reduced, so that it makes more people can afford that, and more people can be made to purchase the product. Consumers often worry less about the cost, such as interest rate, etc., of a loan, but instead worry more about whether they can afford the monthly payment. This is because a customer would look out, particularly the working employed people, they look at whether they can bear the monthly installment or not. So that would be their main concern, not the total cost or the total interest burden. So that is why increasing the payment term, payment period, and trying to reduce the monthly burden may work out to increase the sales. Warranties and service contracts. Another popular technique is for companies to promote sales by adding a free or low cost warranty or service contract. So there is another thing is to increase the sales, companies may give additional guarantee, additional warranties, additional pre-service contract. So these things would also enable the companies to increase the sales. So because they are giving a warranty for an additional period of time, and they are giving maybe service contract for an additional period of time than what is offered by the manufacturer. So that is, or manufacturer himself gives these warranties and service contracts, thus increasing the sales. The next thing is psychological discounting. So what is psychological discounting? Psychological discounting is a strategy. That involves setting an artificially high price, and then offering a product at a substantial savings. So that means you jack up the price and then reduce the price. This is basically psychological discounting. Promotional pricing strategies are often a zero-sum game. If they work, competitors copy them and they lose their effectiveness. So this kind of tactics may not be very effective in a long term, or ultimately it may be copied by the competitors, and consumers also will come to know of these zero-sum games. If they did not work, then money is wasted, which could have been put into other marketing tools. So if these tactics don't work, then it works out to be a costlier or an expensive thing for the retailer. Then comes discriminatory pricing. Companies often adjust their basic price to accommodate differences in customers, products, locations, and so on. So that means many times companies adjust certain differences in the costs to give a uniform price to the customers. But price discrimination occurs when a company sells a product or a service at two or more prices that do not reflect proportional difference in the costs. So it may also happen that the company may want to discriminate. So it is their product or service based on certain aspects. In first-degree price discrimination, the seller charges a separate price to each customer depending on the intensity of his or her demand. So based on the intensity of demand, there can be a price charged. In the second-degree price discrimination, seller charges less to buyers who buy a larger volume. In a second-degree discrimination, the customers who are buying in large volumes do invariably get discounts. In third degree price discrimination, the seller charges different amounts to different classes of buyers, as in the following cases. So there can be different classes. So customer segment pricing. So customer segment pricing, different customer segments are priced differently. Similarly, product form pricing. The product forms are different. So there is some slight variation in the product. So these variations would may be used to give a price discrimination and different prices. And image pricing. So you can also do pricing based on the image of the product. And is also channel pricing. So through which channel, distribution channel, the product is reaching the customer, based on the channel, the pricing may change. And there can be also be a discrimination with respect to the location of the price product or service. Location, where it is, whether if you are going to a theater, whether you are in a balcony or you are in an executive class, so the price would change, product may be the same. Similarly, if you are traveling in an aeroplane, you are in the business class or economy class, so though the product or the service is the same, but look in the location, it is different. Similarly, time pricing, there can be time based on the time the discrimination may happen. There can be happy hours in bars where the products are available at a less period of less time, less prices, discount prices in a particular time period. The next is customer segment pricing. In customer segment pricing, different customer groups are charged different prices. In customer segment pricing, different customers are charged for different prices for the same product or the service. For example, museums often charge a lower admission fee to students and senior citizens. That means, so museum is differentiating different customer segments. So the students and senior citizens are often offered discounts, and other adults are charged the same fee for the entry. Similarly, product form pricing. In product form pricing, different versions of the product are priced differently but not proportionately to their respective costs. Image pricing. Some companies price the same product with two different levels based on the image differences. A perfume manufacturer can put the perfume in one bottle and give it a name and image, price it at rupees 50. It can put the same perfume in another bottle with a different name and image and with a different image and price it at 200 also. Similarly, channel pricing. A typical example of channel pricing is Coca-Cola, which carries a different pricing depending on whether it is purchased in a fine restaurant or a fast food restaurant or a vending machine. So depending on where it is purchased, through what channel it is reaching the customer, the price would vary. Then comes location pricing. In location pricing, same product is priced differently at different locations, even though the cost of offering each location is the same. A theater varies its seat prices according to the audience preferences for different locations. In a theater, there are different locations and there are different prices for the same, but the product or the service is the same. Similarly, we have time pricing. In time pricing, prices are varied by season, day and hour. Public utilities vary energy rates to commercial users by time of the day or weekend versus weekdays. For price discriminations to work, certain conditions must exist. So whether these price discriminations do make sense, to what extent they are effective, what are the conditions for them to be effective. So the following may be considered. First, the market must be segmentable and segment must show different intensities of demand. So that means whatever is the market for a particular product or a particular service, that market we should be able to segment it, and there should be a different demand intensities in different segments. And second condition could be members in the lower price segment members in the lower price segment must not be able to resell the product to higher price segment. So it is again another condition. So the members in the lower price segments, they should not be able to sell the product to higher price segment people, resell the product like that. The third condition is competitors must not be able to undersell the firm in the higher price segment. That means the store competitors should not be able to undersell the firm in the higher price segment. Similarly, the fourth condition would be the cost of segmenting and policing the market must not exceed the cost extra revenue derived from the price discrimination. That means in order to do the price discrimination, whatever is investment required, the revenue should be more than that. The fifth point could be the practice must not breed customer resentment and ill will. So the customer should not feel that they are being cheated, or they should not resent. So they should take it as fair and they should see it as a fair practice. Sixth condition could be the particular form of price discrimination must not be illegal. So that means whatever price discrimination that it is planned, it should be legal and should not be illegal. Product mix pricing. The next thing is product mix pricing. Price setting logic must be modified when the product is part of product mix. In this case, the firm searches for a set of prices that maximizes profits on the total mix. Pricing is difficult because various products have demand and cost interrelationships and are subject to different degrees of competition. So we can distinguish 6 situations involving product mix pricing. They are: 1. Product line pricing, then optional feature pricing, then captive product pricing, then two-part pricing, then by-product pricing, and product bundling pricing. These are the various methods in the product mix pricing. So let us learn about each one of these now. The first thing is product line pricing. Product line pricing involves companies normally develop product lines rather than single products and introduce price steps. So generally companies develop a line of products rather than a single product. In many lines of trade, sellers use well-established price points for the products of their line. So in any established trade, sellers will be using some price points for their product lines. The seller's task is to establish perceived quality difference that justify the price difference. So these price points of various products in the price line, they should be justified. In terms of quality or feature, the customer should feel that these price point differences of the product line are justified. Optional feature pricing. Optional feature pricing is powered by many companies. This is usually done by offering optional products, features, and services along with the main product. That means there is one main product, along with there are options of features and services available along with the main product. Based on the options that customers use, the price would vary. And then we have captive product pricing. The next pricing method is captive product pricing. Some products require use of ancillary and captive products. For example, manufacturers of razors and cameras often price them low and see the high markups on razor blades and film, etc. Another example is when a cellular service operator gives cellular phone free, the person commits to buying 2 years of phone service. So this is also again a captive pricing. Then another pricing method is two-part pricing. So service firms often engage two-part pricing consisting of a fixed fee plus a variable usage fee. The fixed fee should be low enough to induce purchase of the service. The profit can be made on the usage fee. So there is a fixed part and variable part. So that is two-part pricing. Byproduct pricing. So in byproduct pricing, the production of certain goods such as the meats, petroleum products and other chemicals often results in byproducts. If the byproducts have a value to the customer group, they should then be priced on their value. Any income earned on byproducts will make it easier for company to charge a lower price on its main product if the competition forces it to do so. So if the byproduct is valuable and it is also purchased by the customers for a value, then it makes it can be used as a leverage to price lower the main product. Then we have product bundling pricing. The next method is product bundling pricing. Sellers often bundle products and features. And pure bundling occurs when a firm only offers its products as a bundle. So that means many times the products can be bundled together and sold as a bundle. In mixed bundling, the seller offers goods both individually and in bundles. When offering a mixed bundle, the seller normally charges less for the bundle if the items were to be purchased individually and separately. The saving on the price bundling must be substantial enough to induce them to buy the bundle. So when you are doing the bundling and selling, so there generally the total amount charged is a bit less than the otherwise if they are sold individually and separately.